And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. And last time we talked about a really interesting question, the difference between value fulfillment and prosperity thinking, prosperity thinking and fulfillment thinking, and also got into a little bit of kind of myth making, or where do our ideas of gods come from as inner constructs. It was really cool direction. So I don't know if Kris will run with that, but yeah, it was a great episode. If you jump to this one, check that one out too.
Indeed, we trust that you are comfortable, and we thank you for your prosperous consideration.
All right, thanks, Kris.
In fact, we can bring in different kinds of thinking, whether it is prosperity or fulfillment or any other kind of thinking, including mindsets, into the idea of your gods and goddesses and similar myths. So basically, mankind wants to find a way to idealize its own impetus towards growth, its own drive or thrust towards expressing its desires, its search for value, its, how do we say, basically its claim to energy and to power and to feel that experience displayed through the characters of their divine myths, the divine comedies or divine tragedies, either one works just as well, is an idealized projection of what humankind aspires to. Some people will find a resonance with playing the victim, victim thinking, victim mentality, that they are being punished in some way, whether it is through some kind of divine action or a god or goddess, or perhaps the fates or karma. It all works in that same line. If you want and have a need to feel victimized, you will find it even at that layer of consciousness. You will gravitate towards karma. You will gravitate towards an angry, resentful, critical God who may smite you just because you are you. Someone may use their thinking in a complete different manner, the complete opposite. They might have gratitude mindsets and attitude towards showing gratitude, reverence, compassion, love, nurturing, and they will gravitate to a kind of divine expression that reflects that for them. They might have a very kind god or goddess that bestows goodness. Now, because all of these divine caricatures are human generated, talk about artificial intelligence generated or human generated, in this case, any of those so-called divine beings can, just like human beings, just as easily spin on a dime. And the most benevolent kind of super being can turn around and transform you into a pillar of salt because you think you might have transgressed that being's situation, their so-called rules or laws or whatever that you want. Because all of these ultimately represent the archetypal aspects So that deep psychological drama that you all carry with you is simply because you have not made that peace with yourselves. You might still think that somehow or other you are the victim of events, conditions, and circumstances, instead of knowing that these things did not happen to you. They actually happened for you to understand, to let go of what no longer works for you, and to actually cultivate other things that may work in tandem for you. So, because mankind still has difficulty examining their own mind, their own thoughts, their own belief structures, then they still avoid looking into the mirror and embracing all of whom and what they are. Does that make sense to you?
It does. And the thing was just dawning on me when we talk about people feeling a sense of separation from the divine. I think part of that separation could come from uh, this artificial separation between their thoughts and their creations. That those creations are happening outside of them and doesn't have anything to do with the ideas they're entertaining.
Indeed, that is more than possibly so. The so called outer world, the world of physicality, is an reflection of the world of your thinking, of your beliefs. They are projected outwardly for you to be able to integrate. If something doesn't work out in the outer manifestation, that it's an indication. This is the symptom. It is not the illness. It is a symptom of something, a reflection of something that is going on in your psyche, individually and collectively. So it should be considered as an kind of warning system, especially when things do not go the way you would like it to go. So things start to happen to you, whilst in actuality, they are happening for you to reflect on, go back to the source, your mind, see what is in discord. What kind of discord are you entertaining? What kind of inner drama are you entertaining? Identify it, make peace with it, and your situation will change. It will then be reflected on perhaps a situation externally smooths itself out, it works itself out, because internally it has been worked out. Do you follow?
Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
So the process is not magical. It does not require a degree in higher physics or interdimensional physics, but it does require awareness, a certain degree of mindfulness, being able to confront your own inner angst, your own inner dramas, and not just settle, well, this is how it's always been, or this is tradition. Look at what is going on inside, and you will find sometimes it's staring you right in the face. A simple approach like that can really dramatically influence a much more desirable outcome in your life. And who doesn't like a enhanced, beautiful development in their lives?
Well, I don't know that I've met
Very
anybody.
readily, Indeed, very rare will you find an individual that will say, no, I don't want my life situation to change in any way, shape, or form because it might be better. I'd like to moan and complain and have grievances with everything and everyone. Such an individual would certainly be rare indeed.
Yeah, but the irony is for many people, uh, I think they are behaving in that way while not consciously desiring it.
That is true. It is, however, quite possibly the only strategies they have. It may be something they were brought up with, the only thing they know in this respect, in this context. So they are unwilling and perhaps untrusting of thinking in any other way because it still represents a certain level of comfort zone, even if it is painful in one form or another. It is what is known, and what is not known is often suspicious.
Yeah, I'm thinking kind of about the idea construct of I'm going to imagine that all of the worst possible things are going to happen. And that way, when the good stuff doesn't happen, well, it's just kind of what I expected. And now
Indeed,
I'm not disappointed because
you can call it a self-fulfilling prophecy. You can say to yourself, I knew my fortunes were going to disappear. I knew these bad things were going to happen. And yes, you knew because you created it. The same thing applies to futurizing in terms of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Of course, that other shoe is going to drop because it is all that you are expecting. So if you expect something else, then have the attitude that your newfound, more positive expectation is the groundwork for your future life. It might appear to be almost too simple, changing your attitude. But that is what an attitude is for. It is made to be changed when you realize that the attitude you're holding now is not bringing you any benefits, then you can change it. If you could not change your attitude, then you would certainly be in a pickle, not only individually, but collectively.
yeah, I see it used, Kris, and maybe this is a different way to explain it, but I'm somebody may be thinking, um, I'm not gonna think big because if I think big and then it doesn't happen, I'm gonna be disappointed. And so I'm just gonna keep
Indeed.
my thinking small. That way I won't be disappointed. But then it kind of
And
keeps you trapped.
the interesting thing is, if you were to interview older people in their late 70s, early 80s, even into the 90s, one of the most frequent topics of conversations is regretting not doing this or that when they were younger, when they had the opportunity, but chose instead to not be disappointed, therefore, not to invest any energy, thought, or time into something that may have been even calling to them, but they chose to ignore it because they were afraid. They did not love enough. They did not create enough. They did not do this. They did not do that. And they might carry those regrets to their dying breath, wishing they could only turn back time, but that cannot happen.
Yeah, I came across an
The old
interesting quote.
song, Take a Chance on Me, would work very well in this situation. Take a chance on yourself. Trust your being. to follow through on some of your creative ideas.
Yeah, and
Now, you were going to say, please continue.
I came across an interesting quote today, and maybe be interesting to get your perspective. It was something to the effect of that creation happens on the leading edge of fear. And if you're not getting into this sort of out of your comfort zone, that you're not going to sort of create anything new or perhaps more
That is
fulfilling.
100% correct. 100% correct. And it simply mm, highlights the need to step out of your comfort zone, even slightly, so that you can feel the rush of life through your bones, through your veins, get your heart pumping faster, get your imagination to light up at the possibilities that exist, as opposed to shut yourself down, go back into your safe little cage and stay there where nothing different ever happens. There is only a small amount of comfort that comes from being in the comfort zone. But most of the time, you miss out on life. Life is about taking a chance. In fact, the act of birth, you chose to take birth to come here in this plane of existence, even though you knew beforehand it would be filled with challenges. And part of that challenge is to break free of your self-imposed mental and emotional prisons. You have imprisoned yourselves. No one has put you there. You have imprisoned yourselves. So now it is time to take that axe and break the cage, break the walls, escape from your own self and become a different individual. Reinvent yourself. And that is very easily done. It requires the one thing: be willing to step outside of your comfort zone. Because your comfort zone ultimately becomes a prison. And it will squeeze the life out of you. Because it may not want you to leave. Because if you do, think of all the fearful things that are out there in the world. You might get laughed at. You might feel embarrassed. You might lose face. You might be disappointed. And on and on. It will give you a long list of all the reasons why you should not step outside of your comfort zone. You can in turn say, that is very nice. I appreciate that you are concerned for my safety and my well-being. But I trust me, and I am going to step out of this comfort zone, and I will conquer my world. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and I was thinking about that, as humans, most of our fears that we have don't actually have anything to do with like really threatening our lives, or maybe even why fear might exist in the first place.
Absolutely correct. Most of your fears are actually made up. They are mental. Just like the prisons you keep yourselves in, they are imaginary. So by stepping outside of that imaginary comfort zone, you will find yourself far more comfortable than you ever before. You might actually become the person you've always wanted to be. That requires letting go of the person that you have settled for. You have settled for one version of yourself. It is not bringing you joy. So change that. Break those shackles, break the walls, and become who you always wanted to be. Does that make sense to you?
Yep, it does, and something I look forward to continuing to work on.
And of course, this is to be understood that this is not a process that takes 5 minutes. It is not like plugging your kettle into the socket. After 3 minutes, the water is boiled. This is a continual commitment to keep on that path, because the person you are wanting to become will lead you to more and more becoming. That is where the fulfillment steps in. You are fulfilling who you've always wanted to be. And it is a journey, not a destination. Now, what is the time?
Well, yeah, I think we're getting to the end of another episode. I have some
Indeed.
time for a
Would you
couple final
have,
thoughts.
indeed, please feel free.
Well, I was just making a link in my mind between some of the ideas you've mentioned before of our future probability or future selves having a lot to do with creating our present moment or that fulfillment direction, in that they kind of already exist, and we move towards that. So I thought that was a fascinating connection between this fulfillment idea.
Indeed. And it needs to be mentioned that it is not necessarily that your future is a done deal, because it is always changing and transforming. Every moment, every step you take, a new path opens up before you, moment to moment, path to path. You find fulfillment every step of the way. So you, in so many words, will become someone different from your future self. You will become your own self. But that future self that is pulling you into the future is one probable version. You cannot become that self in some ways. You will become your own best self. And there are thousands of you. All probable developments exist. You will indeed be unique. You are not going to step into a future carbon copy of yourself. You will be unique and different as well. You do live in a multidimensional universe in that sense. And very often, many people still think unidimensionally. If you captured even an instant only the snapshot of all possible futures for yourselves, you would retreat, because you would assume that you have to fulfill all of that without realizing, no, you are one unique aspect of that whole future self complex, and you have your own role to play. So it is not a linear progression, but it is filled with adventures each moment and each step of the way. You're the one that's going to be daring enough to challenge your own conventions and go for your future, the one only you can create. Does that also make sense? That
Yeah.
changes the paradigm a little bit as well. Because the usual thinking of a future self is that, well, you are there, you have accomplished these things in 5 years, you will become that individual. You may become similar, but you will still be uniquely you. There are always variations, and self thrives on variations.
Yeah.
With that,
Yeah, go ahead.
continue.
Oh, I was just thinking of and I hope I got it right, Kris, but it was a quote from one of the Seth material. He had said something to Rupert Jane Roberts. You'll become something like I am, as Seth, but when you're Seth, you'll be different. That I'm your future in one way, but when you are me, you will be something different. So I think that was a
Indeed.
interesting
In
way
other
to.
words, in that respect, with Seth and Rupert, or any kind of future probability, it represents the ideal. It represents one version but you must, simply because of your own choices, select that which is best for you.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, we return Joseph to all of your future selves. And we thank you for your consideration.
All right. Thanks, Kris. Awesome episode.